Everybody, on the weekend, whenever you watch this, I'm on the weekend. My son competes in American Ninja Warrior competition, not like the show, but like the obstacle course racing. So he's not like on the show or anything. So I had a few minutes. If you are a parent of youth sports, you know that you have a lot of downtime at times between games and tournaments and whatever. So I thought I'd make a quick video. I'd read a study yesterday. It made me think of what I had made a video about last time. Which was the wave set idea. And there's another kind of idea out there, rest pause type of training. And I saw this study. I don't have it in front of me. It's in the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research. It's basically the time course of recovery from full squat training. It's in the title. So if you want to go take a look at that, again, the February issue 2024, and I think it's Corneo Daza is the author. Forgive me if I mispronounce. That's the first author on it. But interesting study looking at rest pause, but in the form of cluster set training. I'm a big cluster set training fan. Again, if you've watched any videos, you know I like to talk about it. But essentially what the study was a Smith machine back squat study, and it was a velocity-based study as well, VBT. And so it's a very common threshold that they're using 70% of their max is to determine when there's a 20% drop in barbell velocity, that would terminate the set. So, if you have the ability with a wearable or something else, the old Xbox Connect is very popular at larger gyms like Division I universities, etc. And there's other systems too. Where not just Division two everywhere. Anyway, not everywhere, but a lot of gyms. How's that? But essentially, you track you have a certain load. And there's lots of ways to do this, but you might have a load that you want to work with for the day. Maybe it's percentage based, and just like in the case of this study, and you say, all right, you do as many reps as you can until there's a 20% drop off, which is again the common kind of threshold. So you might do 2 reps, you might do 12. And the idea is that you fit the training to the individual's daily recovery, so how they're feeling. And so this study, though, was looking at, okay, let's take that idea of 70% load, and they did 3 sets of training, 4 minutes rest in between, and they did some different set configurations. So they did a 20% drop off, which is your common one. And again, we're looking at total volume as kind of the interest, at least initially, and then a 30% and then a 40% drop off. So you're going to get more reps, right? But you're willing to tolerate a bigger drop off in barbell velocity. The kind of experimental group, the group that was really of interest, those were interest as well, but the other one that was really a focus was this idea of a cluster set. So you do one, it's more of a rest pause, 1 rep, rack it, 10 seconds, do another rep, rack it, 10, and right, and it was the same 20% drop off cutoff. Okay, so you had 4 different rep schemes, using 70% with the 20, 30, and 40% drop off. Of velocity, right? So again, the 40% would mean that you would tolerate, if you're watching somebody do this or you're doing this, you would tolerate slower barbell velocity, so you can get deeper into a set. Where the cluster group did 1 rep at a time and racked and had just a 10-second rest in between. Along with just looking at the volume, like how many reps total were on average were accomplished, they looked at the time, which I think was interesting. They looked at the time course immediately post, and I want to say it was 6 hours, and don't quote me on this, but there was, I think, 6 and 24 hours later. I don't have it in front of me, so there was 4 time points, I believe, and so they did 20-meter sprint, vertical jump, these different measures of kind of lower body power. What was the gist of the study? Well, I'm trying to remember the actual numbers of volume. I believe the cluster group ended up getting, I'm going to say 8 reps per set. I'm trying to remember for sure. The point was, though, is that across all these different repetition range, or these different set configurations, so 3 sets every time with different barbell velocity cutoffs, with the cluster set having that unique kind of 1 rep at a time, is that there was more repetitions gathered with the cluster set method. Okay, and that's the fatigue that resulted was similar to that of the 20, for the 20 to 30, if I recall. Okay, so you had more repetitions, but similar fatigue as the other methods, but the recovery was better with the cluster set. All right, so if you kind of paint this big picture here, the cluster set had similar fatigue as I think it was the 30% group immediately post, but there was more volume that got that same level of fatigue. Then on top of it, the recovery post like 6 and then these farther data points that were, I think, 24 hours if I recall, the recovery was better. Okay, or if not better, it was very close to the other groups. So it's one of these things. It's kind of like interval training, where it's like, well, interval training for like conditioning and running around in circles for hours, they get you to the same place cardiovascularly, but the volume in which you get there with the interval training is a fraction, like 30% perhaps, of what it takes to do the same thing with higher volume. So again, it's this intensity volume kind of thing going on with conditioning. Well, it's a similar kind of thing with the cluster sets by taking more rest between reps. So smaller bites, right? If we think about the supercompensation model, right? You take smaller bites of stimulus with commiserate rest periods rather than taking a big bite of stimulus, let's say a set of 8, okay, where you're willing to go to 40% drop off or something like that. I mean, that's a big bite of stimulus. Well, that means you're going to have a bigger bite of recovery. I always going to say you got to pay the piper, right? So whatever you do, you're going to have to recover from. So the cluster set idea, though, is that you take these smaller bites, and by doing so, you can recover a little faster and do more work. So what does that look like in an applied setting? Well, you could do the 1 rep. This is the Smith machine back squat too. I mean, you could probably apply this to any, and I say probably, I'm assuming you can, but I don't want to overgeneralize the results. But the idea that, and this has been done for weightlifting for a long time, right? You do a 2+1 in the snatch, or a 1+1 in a heavy clean and jerk or something like that. I use this when I prescribe loads for people who have training, that train with me for a while. I'll use cluster sets, even if it's like a kind of a silly looking configuration, like a 4+4 with a 15-second rest in between. It just allows the individual to retain the load during the set and make sure that exercise technique is really, really high. So, aids in recovery, basically. And so those last 4 reps aren't complete grinders, right, if it's a 4+4. But again, the takeaway is that, could you work this in, especially as strength and power? Could you do 2 and then rest, 2 and then rest, and that's your set of 4, right? You work in this, this set rest period, right, where you're chunking out, you're making clusters of little reps. That may be beneficial. So hopefully that made sense. I know you don't have the study in front of you, and I don't either, obviously. But I think an interesting thing to consider and to keep thinking about when we're looking at strength work, more isn't always better in terms of volume. More is better in terms of load, but not necessarily volume. And then in power, higher quality, higher barbell velocity movement is typically better. And there's a spectrum there of load depending on what you want, but that's better than just volume. When it comes to hypertrophy, volume is better. Get the reps in. All right. So again, hopefully that's helpful. Have a good weekend if you're watching this on the weekend. If you're watching this in the year 2030, and this is like old video and whatever. I hope you have a good future weekend. Literally, I hate saying literally. I'm just gonna go. It's getting awkward. See you in the next video.